Good morning, friends. As a part of the introductory lecture for Asian literature, we are moving to an introduction of Nepali and Myanmar literature. Nepal and Myanmar literature are put together because, being the neighboring countries, these two nations follow much of the literary tradition, culture, and history as common. Also, being the neighboring country of India, they also share much of the literary traditions and culture of India, as well as Thai. Their literature gives importance to folklore, religious themes, especially of Buddhist, nature, love, and mythologies. As I was telling you that these nations have an influence of Indian culture and tradition, we could find Ramayana, Jataka tales, and some of the epics of India as a part of their literary tradition. As I'm talking about epics, I should also mention that Japanese and Chinese literature were looking for brevity, as I said in my last lecture. They would like to be very brief, so their literature don't have the genre called epics. Next, we move to Sri Lankan literature, where we could see much of the literature in its oral tradition. The Sri Lankan literature deals with complex philosophical ideas, Buddha's life, Jataka tales, and much in its narrative structure, narrative genre. The country is a rich repository of narratives and narrative styles. As I was telling, much of their literary tradition was stick to short story tradition. We could see different varieties of narrative styles in their literature. Their literature used to talk on social, cultural, religious, ideological, economic, and political issues. Another important aspect of Sri Lankan literature is we could find an influence of Tamil language and literature being one of the neighboring piece of land to Tamil Nadu. Then we move to Pakistani literature. Pakistani literature doesn't hold a very long, old literary tradition because this nation itself has emerged only after partition in the year 1947. So this country has a shared literary tradition of British as well as Urdu. In expression, they use Urdu as their language, but their tradition, culture, and flavors are much British. The themes that they usually take are religious, their political scenario, diaspora, and mixed society. Diaspora standing for a longingness for their birthplace, the nation where they were actually rooted. After partition, much of the people were compelled to move from India to Pakistan. So we could find a kind of diasporic mentality in their literature. And finally, we move to Indian literature, and as we have already studied Indian literature as an exclusive paper, I don't think that I should give much of the idea about Indian literature. To tell a few, India is one of the oldest and traditional nation that holds a very old literary background. Much of the ideas or themes that the Indian literature deals is religion, human values, morality, love, and bravery. One of the important aspects of Indian literature is it is a body of multicultural and multilinguistic output. India is a nation of diverse culture and language. They have their own identity, they all have their own uniqueness. So, Indian literature is polyvocal, and epics, kathas, dramas, folklores form the identity of Indian literature. The modern Indian literature is a fusion of Indian and British ideas, genres, attitudes, and many in its literature. So we could see Indo British ideas and fusion, as well as the colonial thought, as one of the important identities of Indian literature. So, to sum up, this Asian literature is a multicultural and multilinguistic one. Being multicultural, it has so many voices, and it sets an example and defines the other. As I was telling you about Edward Said and Orientalism, the Asian literature emerged as a self descriptive, self defining. to voice out to the world that this other are not exotic, are not uncivilized. And this Asian literature almost and always appears in the region, their regional language. Like Chinese used to write in Chinese language, Indians used to write in Indian language, Japanese in Japanese language, and therefore this Asiatic literature equally is available in translation also. And this Asian literature is setting par with the West and is trying to prove that in no way that these Asiatics are inferior to that of the West. It is self-defining, it is self-expressing, it's the voice, it's a call to the entire world that we are equal and in no way we are inferior. This Asiatic literature has emerged as a part of world literature. It has equally gained a kind of equal prominence in the literary map, and to conclude that it is emerging as a independent discipline, whereas so many universities and countries are starting up with a separate study, with a separate separate, I mean, separate departments in so many universities for this Asian literature. As we have a department of Shakespearean studies, American literary studies, now we have Asian literary studies. So, with this aspect, we are going to approach Asian literature and we are going to search for the uniqueness of Asian literature and trace out the unique culture that is expressed in their literature. And we are going to trace the voices of each and every country that forms Asia. Thank you, students. If you have any doubts, any comments, anything that you want to discuss, you may please post it in the WhatsApp group. Your doubts will be cleared as soon as possible, or in the next lecture, we'll start with clearing your doubts. Thank you.